and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is seeing beyond the box. And it should be a lot of fun to explore this, to see the places where we just have blind spots because we're so acclimated to the way that things are. Like that we don't even recognize other possibilities or solutions because we're so immersed in the challenge or the problem. So I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present and take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy throughout your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, any stress, any negativity or fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine sparkling, brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, electrifying and energizing all your electrons, all your molecules, illuminating all your cells, and making you glow from the inside out. And as you exhale any remaining stress, tension, negativity, or fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together, very softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel the deliciousness of that sensation to bring you present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So this topic is prompted by something that in my own experience, that just cracks me up because it just. Good morning, Rosalind. Thank you for being here, and TGIF to you as well. I This is just so funny to me, and it's sort of a synchronicity of events, which I'm seeing so much more these days. It's just really quite remarkable to notice the interweaving of all these events and synchronicities. I love it. Anyway, I we've been talking about reframing and perspective and truth, and so yesterday I had the privilege of interviewing someone that I've mentioned a couple times on this venue, or in this venue. She's a remarkable woman. Her name is Helen Slotje, and I had the privilege of interviewing her yesterday for the Sustainability Now podcast, because she is the person who, in large part, is responsible for the banning of fracking in New York State. And the while that is an extraordinary accomplishment in and of itself, and she won the Goldman Environmental Prize, which is like the Green Nobel Prize, which is pretty impressive. It's a global prize with one person from each continent winning it, and she won it in 2014 for this fracking effort. The thing that is even more notable than her successful campaign and efforts is that the way that it was accomplished was by thinking and seeing outside the box. And she was told that, first of all, what she was trying to do was impossible. Second of all, that it was criminal because it was defying all these conventions that were just accepted and unquestioned. And it took tremendous courage, but even more than the courage, it took independent thinking. And I'm a big proponent of creative and independent thinking, and I just got to see yesterday how much in a box I had been over an issue that you guys are actually privy to if you've been here with any regularity. Periodically, you have seen me get up from my chair and go chase Maggie because she was chewing on this i- i- very special and beloved plant of mine, which is a night blooming cereus. And so she would be chewing on the plant. I would try to get her off the plant. The only way to get her off the plant was to go over and get her, and she would fly away. And we started playing this game of tag, and she's gotten really good at it, in fact. So she could have me running around chasing her for minutes on end. So this was a very frustrating and persistent loop for months. And the thing is that yesterday I had a revelation, and I have to laugh at myself. And probably you'll laugh at me with me. There are um, there are transparent or semi-transparent curtains that I have tied back on the window where the plant is. And yesterday, for the very first time, I mean, they've been there for years. They've been tied that way for years. Understand that. So, that's how the room is. Like, I don't even see the curtains hardly, because they're just part of the room, right? I don't hadn't separated it in my head, which is hysterical, as curtains. So yesterday I had this revelation that I could actually just close the curtain, and then she wouldn't be able to get to the plant. And it's like I can close the curtain, I can still see the plant, I can still see outside because it's the semi-transparent fabric, and she can't get to it. And it cracks me up that this has been sitting there as a problem, something that beyond a challenge. It was something that I was perceiving and experiencing as a problem for months. And how ridiculous is it that it never occurred to me before yesterday to close the darn curtain? And it was so funny. I was thinking, good morning, Grace Isis. So good to have you here with us. So we're talking about seeing outside the box. So this solution was staring me in the face. It was so obvious, right? And this has been an upset for me for months with Maggie eating the plant. So much so that I would get up in the middle of a broadcast with you guys and go try and chase her away from the plant. And all I had to do all that time was close the curtain. So what led me to the thought yesterday was, well, maybe I could just put something up to prevent her from getting to the plant. And that thought, like, how can I solve this? What can I do to protect that plant? And that thought led me to see, oh my gosh, there's a curtain there. I can close the curtain. And isn't it crazy that this thing that was staring me in the face for so long was invisible to me? And I have another story about that with my brother, which is pretty funny, equally funny, right? So he had a boat, and for the boat, he had this weatherproofing um, stuff that would go onto the boat in bad weather. It was made of glassine, and it was delicate, and he wanted to protect it. He had it laid on the floor in his bedroom, and he'd go into his bedroom and he'd walk around it, and for months and months, maybe even years, it might have been, I don't know. I walked into his room one time, and he said something about, be careful, don't step on the glassine, because he's protecting it. And I said, well, why don't you just put it under the bed? And it was like a revelation to him. What do like, here's this unused space under the bed. He could put the glassine under the bed, it would be protected, and he would have a room that he could walk in. And it had never occurred to him, and he's been chuckling over that for years. And it's exactly what happened with me and Maggie and the plant and the curtain. And I wonder how many other things there are like that in our lives. Well, we see them in our politics all the time. You know, we see policies that, or ways of thinking about things that could be changed. But in our own lives, very simple things. What does it take? And this is the important question, because we have such a calling to find solutions to what have been really long-standing problems, challenges, difficulties, issues, whatever. The question is, what does it take to see the water when we're the fish in water? So like in my office, my curtains have been like that for forever. So I like wasn't connecting them as curtains anymore. I wasn't seeing what was actually there, right? And so what spurred me to coming to a solution was asking a different question. You know, it wasn't how can I keep Maggie away from the plant? Well, it actually shifted from how can I keep Maggie away from the plant to how can I protect the plant? And it was two different things. When I started thinking about keeping Maggie away from the plant, I was chasing her. I was going to get a hook and eye to lock her out of my room, out of the office, so that she wouldn't come in when I couldn't police her. But still, meantime, periodically she would come and eat the plant. I've been chasing her around. I've been trying to entice her with food instead. And when I took my attention off of her, stopping her from bothering the plant and to protecting the plant, then I came up with, oh, I need to put something so that she can't get to the plant. And that's when I saw the curtains that have been there all along. Good morning, Jeanette. Welcome, welcome. It's so good to have you here. So, you know, I'm just so bemused by this. You know, I find it really, really funny that I didn't see this thing that has been the solution that's been there in front of me for as long as I've had Maggie and as long as I've had the problem, you know, of her eating the plant. And, you know, it just, I wonder where there are other places. Me too, Jeanette. I love it too. It's like to be able to see ourselves, to be able to see the obvious. It goes back to the conversation that we had about the emperor has no clothes. I think that was, I don't know if it was this past week or the week before. Anyway, it's being the fish in water and being able to recognize the water. You know, being so in the environment and the assumptions that we make about the environment that makes it invisible to us. That's the thing that's so crazy, you know, that we're not seeing what's right in front of our eyes because we're so acclimated to it. And to circle back around to the story with Helen Slotje and fracking in New York State, everybody, when she started learning about what was going on with fracking, what she found was that everybody was talking about how to regulate it. And the thing is that fracking is a devastating technology for communities and for the environment, and regulating it, there's no good way to regulate it, in other words. So Jeanette says, yes, being open to more allows us to open up more. Exactly. Or open up to more, or opens us up to more. Sorry. So it's true. The question is, how do we get open? Because we don't know that we're not open. That's the thing. So here in the fracking industry, the prevailing concept was you can't do anything to regulate oil and gas. And that's just how it was. You can't regulate it. And and certainly you can't regulate it on a local level. That was part of the genius of what Helen came up with. And so she said, I don't believe that. And she started looking at municipalities, and she recognized that, wow, maybe they can't regulate fracking, but they can regulate the industrialization of land use in their community. Like heavy industry, they can regulate where that's going to be acceptable within their community. And the thing is, and this is the genius of it, what she did was she looked at, well, are we wanting to regulate fracking, or are we wanting to prohibit certain incursions of industry, of pollution and noise and heavy trucks and et cetera, et cetera. The disruption? What we want is to not have that destruction and disruption in our community. And so what are the things that they're wanting to legislate against, right, or protect against? And they started drafting laws or resolutions that would protect the communities from these incursions. And it happened that fracking violated those restrictions, and therefore they were able to block it in over 170 New York communities, which were patchworked in such a way that there was no way they could be putting the fracking and the pipelines and whatever through these communities. They couldn't do it. They couldn't frack because they didn't have enough uninterrupted access to be able to do what they were trying to do. And it's off the chart brilliant. And on some plane, it's obvious, right? It's obvious. We want to protect our water, we want to protect our air, we want to protect our community. We don't want sound pollution. It's obvious. We legislate for those things that are our rights, that are existing rights, and thereby are able to keep this scourge out of our communities. How amazing is that? And so what was it that made that shift? What was it that made that shift for Helen? What is it that made that shift for me with the curtain? What is it that made the shift with my brother and the glassine? So with the glassine, I walked into his bedroom. He's walking around this. He's saying, don't step on it, don't step on it. And I said, well, why isn't it under the bed? Like, why don't you put it out of the way? And it was just an aha moment. And so here with Maggie in the window and the plant, it was like, what changed was not how do I stop Maggie, but how do I protect the plant? Welcome, Sally. Haven't seen you here for a while. So good to have you back. And Rosalind says, instead of banning growing pot, our community is regulating how growers can operate through permitting. There you go. And that's a solution, right? And there's also the question of what's the intention of banning growing pot, or what's the intention of permitting? So to go even a step further, Good morning, Dido. So good to have you here with us. We're talking about seeing outside the box after I had an eye-opening event yesterday where I recognized that there's been a curtain hanging in my window that I could have closed to protect my plant from Maggie um, over 6 months ago, right? So Lisa says control. I'm not sure the context of your observation around control, Lisa, but I think what we are very much subject to is controlled thinking, and we are our thinking is largely controlled in so many ways by the media and by the messages that we receive on the media and on social media, etc. And what Helen called it is consensus reality or consensus thinking. And consensus thinking is what enables us to be persisting patterns that are devastating patterns, but that we all assume to be just the way it is. Like that's just the way things are. I can't do anything about it. And that consensus thinking of that's the way it is allows us to persist with all kinds of behaviors and policies that are not moving us into thriving, that are not moving us into our highest expression. And so Sally says, every time I need to think outside the box, Pavlov shows up for weeks at night, waking me out of a dead sleep. That's a riot, Sally. That is such a riot. So for those of you who don't know, Pavlov is known for training dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. So he'd ring a bell, he'd feed the dogs. Soon, every time the bell would ring, the dogs would get fed. Then he eventually could ring the bell and the dogs would salivate, even though there was no meat there or food there for them as a treat. And we are that way. We are so conditioned. That's so funny. Your other than conscious mind, Sally, has a great sense of humor. I love, 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 love that. And Rosalind says there were gorilla farms, and after harvest left. Do you mean gorilla? There were gorilla farms, and after harvest left the land subject to erosion. So permitting controls and controlled land practices to. Oh, I see. You're talking about the marijuana. There were gorilla farms, and after harvest, they left the land subject to erosion. So they weren't using good. So this is the thing. You're trying to permit that instead of saying maybe the kinds of land use, the kinds of practices, if they're going to grow, that they need to grow in a certain way, like no-till and leaving ground cover and things like that. So permitting controls land practices to protect the waters that discharge to our waterways, and the permitting regulates other things like privacy screens. Awesome. Gotcha, Rosalind. But the thing is, the another way to be able to regulate this, because the problem was that the land was subject to erosion, is to say, hey, you guys, if you're going to grow this, part of the condition is that you keep land cover, so ground cover. So if you're once you harvest, you get to plant ground cover so that we can enhance the soil, and so that we can this is all part of regenerative farming, and we can, as we're enhancing the soil, increase its sponginess, which increases its ability to hold water, which feeds the aquifer, which also helps to mitigate changes in climate and all kinds of trickle down things. So maybe those are things that you can work into the permitting and the conditions of the permitting, to say, hey, you don't get to spray pesticides, you don't get to spray herbicides, you get to keep ground cover, and etc. Maybe you can add that into the permitting, because that's really going to not just solve the superficial erosion thing by um, by permitting or limiting the area, but to start to integrate and indoctrinate people to healthier methods of cultivation. So, maybe it's not limiting the volume, but maybe it's more about transforming the way that they're navigating the situation. It's all about the questions we ask. That's the bottom line. And that's where brainstorming, you might have heard the power of brainstorming, where people just throw the most ridiculous ideas up against the wall, because what that's forcing you to do is to get out of the box of the conventional thinking. And I have a client in 3 minutes, so I'm going to wrap up. But this has been such an interesting week of conversation, navigating conflict and perception and reconciliation, and being out of the box, and uh, really talking about how to access the creative power of our minds. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Lisa says the answer is the easy part. Asking the right question is the hard part. No joke. It truly, truly is. So let's be inventive and curious and creative in asking the powerful questions. And like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? That's a really good question, actually. And anyway, Maggie and I go live here in the Core Connection on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And as always, it is such a pleasure and privilege to spend this time with you. I just value you so deeply, and really appreciate this opportunity to be exploring these ideas and thoughts and discoveries with you. So lots and lots of love. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday weekend, and let's really cherish and value our independence on this Independence Day weekend.